right. Good morning. I am not muted this time, everyone. Welcome to CRPN Central, the podcast where we're bringing in some of the best people in this industry to have conversations with them about some of the most important topics so we can come together, bring our ideas together, and get something done. Just a reminder, the Clinical Research Payment Network, the mother of CRPN Central, is free for clinical research sites to join. We offer free opportunities, and we save the sponsors a ton of money on their clinical projects. So if you have any interest, please feel free to reach out to me. Coming onto the stage first is Mitch Hilby. Mitch, how you doing, sir?
Mute free. I like it.
Mute free, working on it. I can tell you, there's never a perfect intro. You're always going to run into something.
This is the perfect. It's always the perfect intro. Change that mindset.
All right. Thank you, Mitch. It's always perfect because it's always unique, right? All right. I'm going to bring both of you on because we've got a lot of talk about today. So Mitch Hilby and Lauren Stockwell, holy moly, the host from Utopia right here. It's amazing. How are you guys doing today?
Great as always. Living the dream.
Yeah.
So I have to call this an old school episode of CRPN Central. This was episode number 4. Learned a lot, had a lot of conversations, but my gosh, the content, it aged so well. It's like a fine cheese, a fine wine as far as this all goes. Tell me, what do you guys think of the podcast?
I love it. I don't know if old school is insulting to our guests and tell them they age like cheese, but we'll see how they feel. We always talk about like the best of the mashups, and it concluded with this focus and takeaway on relationships. But the other similarity that I saw throughout both the presentations were really this alignment with an understanding from those in the industry that the patients are there. We just need to be able to communicate with them. We need to reach with them. There's the interest. They want to participate. The physicians, they want to be able to give those opportunities to their patients, but they don't know how to get that out there,
Yeah. So. I saw so many interesting patterns, exactly what Mitch said, where we have this access, we have this understanding that these people are here, and the ways that we reach them. And since this podcast aired, it's been really interesting to see how much more emphasis has been placed through the FDA, through action, through talk, through us actually taking the steps necessary and continuing to speak this narrative, right? This information is not new, but I feel like the way that we've acted on it has been much more intentional, especially in the last 6 months or so. And I want us to continue that intentionality throughout, not only this conversation, but if we keep talking about it, I've said it before on this podcast, but with volume comes change, and the louder we scream, the more goes on.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. And oh my gosh, this is something that must be talked about. This cannot be swept under the rug, and we can't let it be swept under the rug. All right, so coming onto the stage are these superstars, Miss Janette Alicea, Ted Barduson, Scott Stout. Full house. I can't even see the CRPN logo over there anymore. All of these wonderful faces are covering it, and that's a much better piece of artwork. So we have so much to talk about right now. Let's go ahead and introduce our guests. It's been a year, so tell me one thing that's changed in the past year since you had this interview, something that has helped you on a professional level. Ladies first. Jade, how are you doing today?
I am well, coming live from Miami, Florida.
It's good to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on to the podcast today. For those of us who don't know the Janette Alicea, would you please introduce yourself to the audience?
My name is Janette Alicea. Everyone knows me as Jade. I am an outreach community service person, okay? Outreach community. I do networking. I have had the honor to open up 2 sites so far. I'm in the 2nd site right now. Beautiful office, Cooper City, with a doctor, a family practice doctor that's have over 30 years experience, have worked in an institution research. He was a PI before and stopped just to open up his practice, and now he wants to go back into research. So he is hoping that he could actually blend in his healthcare with research at this time. And I can say that I have been networking with local pharmacists, local insurance agencies,
Wow.
community service, the library, even the election board, which is, you know, the Miami-Dade election community have allowed me to reach out to all of the clients and people who has registered already to vote.
Wow.
That is outreach. That's true community outreach. And I think that we're going to see something about that in common with our friends over at MedVector.
Yeah.
Ted and Scott, would you be willing to introduce yourself to the audience and tell me how is MedVector doing?
So I guess I'll go first. Hi, Scott Stout, CEO of MedVector. Well, when we're talking about what's changed, I think people are starting to listen. People are starting to fall out of the well, that's just how it is mentality. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we know right now is that patients are interested in clinical trials, right? They're interested in participation, and patients are also starting to recognize that this isn't about being a guinea pig. This is about access to alternative medications, right? New solutions. And so what MedVector does is we enable these local physicians to offer clinical trials as a care alternative from their practice without having to become an investigator. And so this is really groundbreaking because it opens up access not only for these patients to participate in these clinical studies, but also opens up access to these patients for our clinical trial sites. And so it's really a kind of a perfect bridge for inclusion and diversity and participation. And it's getting better and better.
Yep.
So Ted, follow that.
Yeah, that is well said. I'm Ted. I'm CEO of MedVector. I think what Scott is saying is so true, is that people are starting to listen. And I think the group that I've seen the most movement in is the sponsors. They're starting to feel that, okay, you know, we've all known that trying to get to that specialty physician is the holy grail of unlocking patients. But it's always had some elements of compliance that are a problem, or operationally it's too difficult, or my study won't fit that mark. And I've really seen that conversation moving in a different direction. Probably the most impactful thing that's happened is the FDA guidance that came out, and really that's starting to move the needle, and I really want to get into that. Go ahead, Scott.
I was just saying the diversity push that's happened has, I think, been a really, really positive catalyst. And the reason it's been such a positive catalyst is within sponsors, they're giving a certain toolbox of things that they can use to recruit and things that they can use to engage patients. And everyone was just kind of like in this funk of patient recruitment's hard. You know, it takes a really long time to find enough patients and to you know, access those patients. So everybody almost had kind of permission to fail, as long as they used their toolbox that they had. There was no incentivization to step outside the box and try something new.
Accountability.
Yeah. And now the diversity thing that's come out, where it's like, all right, not only do you have to try something new, but you have to show us you have a plan on what you're going to try that's new. And it's given people, not so much forcing them to step outside the box, it's giving them permission to step outside the box. That's where we've seen a lot of the, you know, interesting headway.
Yeah, I've always seen, it's always been the sponsor saying, I threw $1 billion. I threw so much money into this project. I'm not going to be the guinea pig on this. We're just going to go the conservative, the safe way, because I can't risk failure. And now it's like, oh snap, I guess you're going to have to try something different. Now we're kind of like coming up to the wall, and they're actually going to have to try something different.
Yeah, our phone's been ringing.
Yeah.
We haven't had to do it.
Yeah. It's,
the other thing that Dr. Fox, that I've really appreciated when you kind of, we keep this in the concept of, we did this podcast, quite a while ago, and now where has it come from? It's really the perseverance of the people that are on this call and the folks that report to all of us to keep that ball moving forward, because it is really, I think, encouraging to me. I remember I spent some time with Jay down at SCRS Global Summit and Lauren down there, and just to meet them and the value that they have in the community to make sure that diversity is getting its fair shake in clinical trials. And then I had the pleasure of getting involved with Mitch at SOS and SCRS West and Diversitrial, which takes it to a whole nother element of a site that's primary focus is diversity in clinical trials. It's that type of structural companies that need to happen to push the message out there. And that's exciting for MedVector as well.
Yep. So this is the follow-up podcast to the audio-only interviews from over a year ago. The topic was diversity and inclusion, and just a secret, this live event was scheduled before the DAP came out, before the FDA guidance. So this is a coincidence, but a very happy little coincidence. We're going to bring in our inner Bob Rosses here. But so we have Jade, one of the strongest community volunteer members that I have ever met in my life. Every Tuesday, going to the bread line, going to help Miami, serving food, advocating, and she hasn't stopped. She's only gotten further with all of her community groups, all of the voting registration, making sure that everyone that she runs into is aware of clinical research as an option and want to make sure that they have access to it. We have Scott Stout, Ted Barduson of MedVector. I wrote an entire article on healthcare integration, and I truly believe that healthcare integration is going to be the future of research because of technology like MedVectors, where we can start to bring healthcare practices into community engagement so that we can finally offer patients access to trials. Doesn't matter, it sounds like diversity trials here, doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter what they look like, it doesn't matter where they live, they have readily accessible clinical trial options. And guess what? By the way, anyone ever heard of BARDA? BARDA? Decor? Back in October? Live BARDA? So they literally said the inability of patients to access the clinical research at their HCPs, at their doctor's offices, is literally a national security risk because of the lessons we learned at COVID. Wow. So now it's going all the way up to BARDA, all the way up to the branches of government saying this has to happen from FDA over to BARDA and back. But I've said enough. I do want to call out Jason. Jason, thanks so much, man. Jason agrees. I do agree with that. Sponsors are starting to listen. They're starting to get on board. They're starting to see that this is not a pipe dream. It's actually possible. And we have companies coming together to make it possible for our communities. So I just wanted to start with Jade. When you listen to the podcast, from what you said versus what Scott and Ted are saying about what MedVector is doing to offer to communities versus how you're integrating into the communities, how did you feel about the analogy between it?
You know what? I think that is the most important thing that we're doing together, because without bridging our services, there is no going out in communities to help. We need their service. We need everything that they're doing for us, their companies, their technology, in order to get what I am doing here in communication in order to serve the community and get the patients that don't know what can help them in a study. You know, I have a mom pop community pharmacy that's willing to use any technology at this time in order to let us know who's on any medication that is inclusive for any study. They're not going to give us patient data. However, they will put us in communication with those patients who are taking that type of medication. You know,
Wow.
it's incredible that if we walk the walk and start getting to meet all our communities, they're welcoming.
And so as Jade reconnects, the one thing that I noticed, it sounds like Scott and Ted, it sounds like from what Jade is saying, it's not just the sponsors who are starting to listen. There are communities who are starting to think, wow, this is possible. If I can leverage this technology, I have patients who are willing to be in research. Why can't I create community involvement? So what have you seen on the front lines?
You know, there's interesting components around the patient opt-in, and we're finding ways to actually reach patients. So like what Jade was referring to in a pharmacy, knowing what patients are on the old version of a medicine. And so like an example that I like to talk about is when we think about clinical research, a lot of times we're thinking about something new, right? Saying something that we have no idea if it's going to work as well as it does, but we've got a really good understanding of how it should. Now, that's kind of what we all think about. But the type of patient that I like to think about is, let's say that there's a like Humira, right? Which is a painful injectable that somebody has to take. I think it's twice a month, right? So
my mom's on it.
Real good, right? So what if there was a clinical study that was now Humira in a pill or a topical cream? Do you think that the people taking Humira would like to know that that exists and that that's an option for them? Of course. So it's this weird kind of, at what point does research become invasive, as in try this, versus when is it relevant? And I think that the key behind this whole drive is these relationships. So it's, Dr. Fox, you and I have talked about this a lot, that clinical trial candidates are not medical mysteries, right? They typically have an existing diagnosis, they're on an existing medication, and they have a relationship with a local treating physician. So what MedVector is doing, and where we're seeing a lot of these successes is by engaging these gatekeepers, right? So these people that have the relationship to where they can start holding that conversation. And a lot of times the conversation, we don't want these people to try to recruit for us. We want these people to just have the conversation. Hey, this exists. Is this something you would like to know more about?
Yep.
Now, on the flip side of that, where MedVector is so important, is we're able to enable that introduction and facilitate those, select appointments from the physician's practice, and also compensate them for doing that. So the fear of losing their patient to another doctor essentially goes away. And so this is where I think that the real headway that we're going to have is in this, this place of, I can now provide better care for my patients, whether it's a pharmacy or a physician, and not have to give the patient away. That's kind of the key structure that we need to stand on.
Yep. And so, Ted, what do you have to follow up about that? I had some ideas, but I don't want to take the stage here.
Well, I think one of the things, kind of going back to the whole theme of diversity and the action plan that just came out, I thought it was super interesting that Dr. Caleb said that participants in clinical trials should be representative of the patients who use the medical products, right? So that is just underlining with a big exclamation point, that this is something that needs to be focused in the community. And the draft guidance is setting that piece up, right? It's setting up that type of relationship. But it still goes back to the community and that conversation that a specialist is going to have with that patient to inform them about this. So part of moving the needle from a diversity standpoint is really how are we able to operationalize clinical trials in the community? How are we able to operationalize the access to trials from my doctor's office? How are we able to then show that we are representing the population that's using this drug with the people that need the drug?
And that's an excellent point. And there's a big misunderstanding about diversification and diversity in this marketplace to start with. A lot of times when we talk about diversity, we're thinking about fairness, right? And what is fair and how do we create equitable solutions for communities of color as well as, white communities, right? So the interesting thing is it's not about fair, because if you have, let's say you've got 13% of the population is Black, and you've got 13% of your clinical trial as Black, that's still a really tiny bucket for a biological significance. So it actually requires a heavier push toward communities of color, not to make it fair, but to bring those buckets up to statistical significance as well, to prove that it is safe biologically.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you highlighted that, Scott, because that's a big misconception that I've seen quite a bit myself, is where you talk about the percentage of population that exists versus that market share, if you will, of
it's not about fair.
Right.
It's about biological significance.
It's
proving efficacy.
Right, exactly. It's a proven
all statistics. You're going to normalize across certain ethnic groups. It's just going to happen. When you have sufficient data, you're going to start to see that level of normalization. That's what your DSMCs are going to want to see. It doesn't really matter about being fair. It matters about doing it to a point where you achieve not only statistical significance, but also clinical significance.
Yep.
So this is where, let's just debunk a myth right now. And it's going to be all of those local sites that are saying, oh my gosh, this kind of technology is going to put me out of work. They're like, the doctor is going to get all the visits, the doctor is going to get all the money. And so therefore, me as a site, we're not going to have that revenue stream anymore. Let me just say this right now. Imagine a world where you're going to have a required triple or quadrupled enrollment value on every single one of your protocols. Because that is the future that we're looking at with these end values. We have this huge hurricane of work coming at us to sites that can't even take the load as it is. So when you start to lean in on your healthcare facilities using healthcare integration to offer your specializations into healthcare, you're still a local community site. You're still going to be in business. Everyone still needs you because you have to have that relationship maintained in your community. And guess what? Your throughput is going to be through the roof because you're going to have higher enrolled values throughout healthcare integration. That is what we're going to be looking at.
By the way, MedVector's free.
Well said.
So there's that.
So I'm waiting for someone in the comments
Scott.
to debunk me.
I spoke over you, Scott. Say that again.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying, and MedVector's free to the sites on top of that. So, the way that our model works is we recognize that there is conflict of interest of trying to, take, resources out of one pocket to put it into the other, rather than how about we stop wasting as much money as we are in recruitment and instead focus it on the treatment and the application. That's what.
So Mitch, you've been quiet, my friend. What do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, the way all this conversation is unfolding is that simple concept of we can't do it all alone, right? It takes a village. Multiple parties need to be involved. We have to educate. We have to inform. And I couldn't agree with Scott more. I mean, we've met before, but we haven't really had any long sit-down conversations about this. But one of my biggest frustrating pain points is this ROI concept. And when you talk about recruitment and retention, and community engagement, and how all that looks. But you kind of have that similar approach where it's just a matter of being there, right? It's informing people, it's giving them the tools, the ability and the mindset to create that equity for themselves when it comes to research in healthcare, and not just trying to shovel a research opportunity in front of their face every time something comes across your table.
Yeah.
It's that consistency with being with their physician. It's creating those consistencies and being there unconditionally, as we try to do all the time. And I know Lauren had her hand up, and she was
Yeah, no, just to kind of piggyback off of what Mitch said, and something that maybe sparked some other conversation about best practices potentially, is just hearing Jade's story in this podcast and also today. She, to me, feels like a driver of that sort of a relationship. And I think it's on us as organizations to initiate and to appoint a driver of those sort of initiatives for every single organization. That doesn't mean that it's a full-time job. That doesn't mean that it's, you only have one salary dedicated to that particular role, but you need somebody who's going to ask the questions at the table. You need somebody who's going to say, how can we do this better? Who is thinking outside of the box and thinking about ways that they can engage themselves within the community. There's so many site networks out there that are doing these best practices and are initiating them. Right off the top of my head, I heard QCR's story at ACRP this last year, a few months ago now. That was last month. Wow, that's weird. But anyway, it feels like forever ago. There was QCR is a site network, and basically they have a street team, right? And they've initiated a street team where they go out, and their entire full-time job is to just go to these different communities, speak at schools, speak at different conferences, speak at different things, just to help engage that community. Now, of course, that's them allocating dollars to that specific person, but why don't we have a champion? Why don't we say, hey, here's a badge of honor? That not only helps with recruitment and retention of participants and representative participants within the community, it helps build trust, but it also invests in the employee as well, right? If you give that person extra delegation or extra responsibility or ownership over that specific task, and they get to go out there and be creative and think of fun things to do and think of fun ways to engage the community, that person's sparked, right? Their joy is sparked, their inspiration is sparked, their excitement is sparked. They get to come and pitch ideas and talk about different things and say, here's how I think we can help this community.
Yeah. Well, to me too, to add to that, it's continual engagement and then empowering those physicians to be able to have those maybe higher level conversations. You're making it mainstream. And that's what we need to do, because research is not mainstream by any.
It's the best kept secret in healthcare. That's what we always say. We're like, it's
absolutely.
And nobody tells anybody.
I like that, the best kept secret in healthcare. But yeah, it needs to be. I mean, that's I think that's how I see it, right? It should be mainstream. We should talk about it more. There should be way more activism, if you will, regarding research participation.
And I'm so sorry. That's also on us too. Sorry, I have to piggyback off that, because I think so often, like, people ask me what I do for a living, and I just say, oh, I work in clinical research. And, nobody wants me to go into this whole spiel of things, but why not? Let's take it on ourselves to be the champions for this industry, to talk about the work that we do. Obviously, it's been politicized in the last few years, but let's ride that wave and let's talk about that and talk about the ways that we helped people live longer and better lives and gave people back more birthdays and help them spend more time with their families, right? How beautiful is that? And why aren't we screaming it from the rooftops?
I just tell people I'm Batman. So.
What?
I just tell people I'm Batman.
Yeah, see, that's
so you're absolutely right. There are far more research deserts in this country and across the globe than ever. And sometimes, oh yeah, we do research. Sure, we have this here, that, there. Way too many just the rights. We'll get through that. And I just realized Jade is in Miami. Do we know if Miami is getting any of that hurricane weather stuff?
Not right now.
So, okay. So I'm a little worried about her. Hope she's okay. But what I did want to bring in was, so Jade had a really cool comment in her interview. She said that she went to this hospital. It was predominantly Black. And they were all, like, the majority of the population was Black. She'd go in there. Nobody would speak Spanish. It was all like a diversity pocket, or little diversity pocket is what we called it. And then at the same time, she went to this other hospital, and it was predominantly Hispanic. And something that really hit me, what she said was, she said, it's okay to have your specialized little diversity section. You don't have to be a melting pot for everything everywhere, because that's not how culture works. That's not how community works. If we want to be in communities and we want to have comprehensive diversity across, we have to engage multiple communities, not expect the same thing out of every community.
Yeah, I mean,
that was huge. That's bespoke, right?
Yeah, I talk about that till I'm blue in the face all the time, right? I mean, that's my thing. And I still haven't gotten in trouble for it. It's talking about white sites, and just, physician looks like me, staff looks like me. Not everybody is inherently going to feel comfortable coming to me for anything, which makes sense, and I'm totally okay with that. I'm not offended. All I want to do is make sure that you do have those opportunities and those options. Lauren?
A really, really interesting product that I actually just spoke with a site network. I've been collecting kind of best practices across the industry, and the site network actually built out a system that compares their hiring practices in their payroll to the US Census. And that was in real time too, right? So it's like live action. We fire somebody. Now you are 25% Hispanic population inside your staffing. That's based on, there's 66% Hispanic population in the US Census in your area. Like, let's kind of get those numbers closer to each other. And I thought that was super interesting that they placed emphasis and effort on building this bespoke model and this system within their HR system to be able to actually take action on it, because data shows, and data is super important as we take those actions and make those decisions at a higher level. So they were able to do it based on the census and that area.
So
one
Scott,
thing that,
go ahead, Ted. I was going to ask, can you follow up on
it
that?
just dawned on me, and I agree with that practice. But it also opens up one of the questions that I think we deal with when we're trying to attack diversity, and we'll just recruit in an area that is non-white. And we'll recruit those patients, but we're not able to get to those specifics. We're able to maybe do a Facebook ad. We're able to get to one patient at a time, and they may enroll. I think that's where the combo of the community with the physician, where when we talk to that physician, now all of a sudden, we're not talking about one patient. We're talking about the potential 3,000 patients that they deal with. But more importantly, we're able to, via the doctor, reach out to that patient directly with their name. We're able to understand when they're going to be able to come in and see their doctor, so that it's not about identifying top of funnel patients. It's talking about truly screening and ultimately randomizing patients. And that's what's going to move the needle on the recruitment, on diversity. It's randomizing. It's not just having some pretty numbers at the top type of thing. And I think we've got to remember that.
So that's another really big question, is what is the KPI to address diversity?
Well, I'm kind of on the fence, and this is going to be controversial here for this group. So don't everybody hate me, but I'm on the fence a little bit about community outreach. And what does my gut tell me about it? My gut says, yes, it's important, right? But there's another part of me that's saying, what is it that we're outreaching about? Are we doing a picnic for clinical trials? I mean, that just sounds insensitive. Like, isn't the outreach that makes more sense for those community physicians and those community hospitals to then have those conversations with those patients? Or is it actually we should be going to church groups and singing hallelujah for clinical trials? I'm on the fence about it.
I always said, if you come up to a patient and you ask them to be a part of a trial, and that's the first time you've met that patient, you're too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about building relationships.
Yeah, something I heard that really helped me connect to it is, like, you wouldn't walk up to somebody the first time you met them and say, "Will you marry me?" Right? You say, "Hey, you're beautiful. Like, I would love to take you on a date, and like, let's get to know each other," and like those kinds of things. And so that's
credibility.
that's how I look at community engagement personally. That being said,
I've been in a clinical trial, and I was in the hospital, and the doctor walked by and said, "I think I have something that would make you better." There was no courting.
Yes.
It was the right place at the right time.
Well, right place, right time for that situation.
Yeah, right place, right time, for sure. But that being said, I think also engaging the physicians is another really, really important tactic. And as we continue to build out this physician base that is more representative of the communities that we want to serve, we need to allow more room for butts inside of the whole process, right? These research naive, research limited physicians that actually represent these communities need to be given trials in order to help serve those communities. And so I think in the feasibility process, as we're looking at these physicians and we're evaluating them and we're saying, hey, do we want to grant you this trial? We have to allow the room for butts, but we can learn, but we can figure it out. But we have a sub-I under us that has the expertise, or a really great coordinator under us, right? And instead of just saying, oh, you've never had a trial, sorry, you don't get this trial. We need to allow that space to, again, give that next generation of research PIs the chance to build up their repertoire and their resume.
So that just brought back a memory, Lauren. And I don't know how many of you have approached physicians to be a part of research, but it's, hey, I'm trying to build a physician list so I can have a physician list for research. Would you like to be a part of it? And they said, sure, give me a trial now. So when you approach a physician, they immediately expect like an immediate outcome. You have a trial, therefore I send patients to you. You cannot, and Jade, tell me if you run into this, but it's like kind of catch-22. I need physicians so I can get a physician database to get the trials, but then my physicians don't want to work with me unless I have trials to give them. And that's therefore I'm just in this really weird catch-22. Have you ever run into that when you try to approach local HCPs?
I do. And one thing I want to get off this subject really quick. I have a table at a farmer's market on Saturdays, right? And I have my logo and a big board that says, I have a trial for you, just ask me, right? So people come to ask me, and what I do is they let me know who are their doctors and their MDs, their medical doctors, what zip code they're in, and I go to visit them when the patient is interested in a research, okay? Because what happens is that I'm in this section, everyone is coming to this farmer's market, and when they approach me, I take their information down, I get their PCP information, and they want to be in a study, but we're close to their home. Some of these agencies, some of these centers don't have a van to go pick up the patient. They have to come all by themselves. So I have a list of patients that I need now to locate their doctors in order to go and just tell them, listen, I have your patients and they're willing and waiting for research. Wow. And so like that, we can connect you with studies. And this is every Saturday. And, sometimes you ask for it, and now you have a bucket full of just names, address, and doctors that I have to go to and meet just to see if they want to participate.
So I hear the story. I have a question for the group here. We occasionally get phone calls. So we don't register patients for clinical studies, right? We help sites connect to doctors. We do HCP recruitment and all of that. But we get the occasional patient that calls the MedVector number and says, what studies do you have right now? Mm-hmm. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because the way that I look at that is, this is somebody that's motivated monetarily. Yes. And they're not just looking for a study, they're looking to be a guinea pig, right?
Yeah, I mean, it might be.
I feel like maybe that aspect is hurting the industry for the rest of us when we're need to be closer to the the pharmacy model of targeting a patient specifically because we know that we could help them, rather than asking the patient to come to us for whatever umbrella of clinical studies we have. I'm curious of the group's thoughts here. Maybe I'm thinking about it wrong.
I know, I guess my thought here is most of the patients that we come across, or that I've come across in my years of research experience here, those patients who are only really in it for money repetitively, tend to stick more to phase ones. They're not calling about a phase 3, specific
$25.
therapeutic area trial. Because phase one's more so, I mean, realistically, that's more
It's
what
best.
the money's at. They're quicker, quicker turnover time until you can get into another phase 1 study, and they know where those centers are. So they're probably not trying to hit. Not that it doesn't happen, because you do get double ups on enrollment. They try to hop around to multiple sites on one, study, and we catch those. There's great systems out there, but
also I have in my brochures and in my sign, I have diabetes, Crohn's, I have high blood pressure. I have a specific conditions that not just somebody is walking by and saying, well, yeah, I want to be in a study. I have specific.
Okay, good. That makes a lot more sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Specific conditions that I know there's doctors that I am aware that they are running these studies that I can refer to, depending if they have transportation or if this person that comes up to me is in the same or nearby zip code. I put them in communications with them in order for them to go into the study, but yeah, I won't refer someone that just comes up to me and be like, yeah, I just want to be in a study.
But when it comes to diversity and inclusion initiatives, right? I mean, I think that's where your initial question was posed to, Scott, was kind of like where you're on that fence and how does this look with engaging the communities? And what Jade's point was, where she's at the farmer's market, that looks like that unconditional community engagement to me. So those patients, that diverse group of people she's meeting in her community, at the farmer's market, they trust.
But it was also specific for an indication. It wasn't just this is CRPN. Come learn about CRPN. It was this is are you struggling with diabetes? We have a study for that. So I'm glad that we started talking about targeting it a little bit more, because to me, when we start talking about community outreach and I bring my sign that says that that this is what I do, to me, I feel like that's a scary avenue that yes, it's going to, educate people that there are options out there, but it also could have potentially the opposite effect of, why are you fishing in this pond? Mm-hmm. So it's just something that I've been thinking about a lot, and it's just wanted to pose the question.
And that's the interesting thing too about community outreach or community engagement events. It really depends on how you're doing that, because like you said, why are you fishing in this pond? That to me already implies like that aspect of being transactional.
Yeah,
right? Like I don't want anything out of you.
Right.
I'm just there to empower you and educate you on clinical research, so that when something does come across your path, like you get a fresh hypertension diagnosis, and that thought will now cross your mind, like, oh well, what research study can I make?
Yeah, what do you want? You're talking to me. What do you want?
Right,
and
because
then
you're informed of those options or those potential.
My favorite. So this is a professional patients happen, okay, but as far as scientists go, if a patient meets the IE criterion and they are screened and recruited, and they are not a repeat offender, like they're not, site hopping or anything like that, that's not our place to question that. We have followed our rules.
Yeah.
But what really gets me is when you have an IE criterion that says that the trial participant must speak fluent English. That drives me crazy. And there are trials right out there with ICFs that talk about that. So that's the biggest question. We're talking about diversity and inclusion. We're talking about treating everyone like human beings with the respect they deserve. How do you think we're going to tackle getting translations to informed consents to a way where we can actually include everyone?
Yeah, I mean that's frustrating. Sorry, Lauren, you can take it, and then I'll jump in.
No, you go ahead.
So
you lean forward.
Frustrating from like the ClinOps standpoint, because it's just money, and that's it. It's money to get patients in trials. That's all it costs.
That's right.
I've looked at those translation sheets, what the pricing looks like for different languages. They don't vary that greatly. Especially if our inclusion-exclusion criteria or that informed consent isn't extensively long, which it shouldn't be wildly long for an informed consent. you're really not spending all that much money just to be able to allow people to participate. So right off the gate, if you're just like, well, you're not worth it financially for me to include you, it's pretty frustrating. I know Jade mentioned in the podcast that automatically it's Spanish and French, which is phenomenal. Spanish and French, though, are two of the easiest to do because those go across the study for most clinical research sites, especially if we're doing research in the US and then like in Canada. Those are the two easiest targets here in the US.
Mhm.
Spanish and French are necessities for translation services. But, obviously with the Arab Board for Clinical Research and like Habibis United with the connection of diverse trials there, Arabic translation is huge. I know one site in my career that I visited that actually had Japanese speaking staff in Southern
Wow.
California. They were in Anaheim, and they would always try to get, Japanese translations, and it is a pain. Not everybody's willing to do that, but it's how do we make other people be willing to pay money? I don't know. That's a tough
Well,
question.
part of it might be, Mitch, just like the principal investigator is the primary driver for a site to get good studies, right? Their experience, their ability to set that up. We need to have some ability so that sites can emphasize, just like a PI, here's their diversity action plan. Here's their ability to access these patients with, if it's translation software. So it's part of the process to get studies, because then it's going to be paid for. If we don't have something that's paid for, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I've always
Telemedicine has already been used for translation services for like 20 years.
So easy.
So
It's a
like
piece
most
of cake.
hospitals have them. In fact, maybe people don't know this, but a hospital, if like, let's say it's a foreigner gets hit by a car and they need a major surgery, the hospital has to give you the diagnosis in a language that you're comfortable before they can do anything. So what used to happen is somebody would get hit by a car on Friday night, and all of the translation service people wouldn't be available until Monday or Tuesday the following week. So that patient would sit there waiting. And so this is, a wasteful spending for the hospital, and also like pain and suffering for the patient, right?
Yeah. That's horrible.
So telemedicine has already solved that. And there's around the clock telemedicine services, and hospitals are already familiar with using it. So to me, I agree with you, Mitch. This is a pricing play of a sponsor being cheap and not understanding the resources behind it. And how do we fix that? Well, we get things to market more quickly, right? As a site, you enroll successfully, and then you have the sites have so much more authority than they believe that they do. Because we spend all day talking on the pharma side, and they're terrified of you guys.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it feels the opposite because they're kind of.
Well, yeah, it's like under the thumb.
I'm sorry. If every site staff member said, I walk away, research would stop right now.
Yep.
There would be nothing.
Absolutely, Lauren.
So technically speaking, we have all the power. Now, of course, we have to get paid for that power. But like the point is like, we do have this opportunity to ask questions, to engage, to request more, to ask for more, to build it in, to justify it, to speak on our behalf. And so, even just education at the site level or resources at the site level that talk about how to budget for that, how to look for those hidden costs, how to figure out what they need and how they need it and how they can justify it. So that way they're able to do that to the sponsors and get that money back. And they're not operating on these thin margins.
Yeah.
So
I think real quick, Doc.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest mistakes that the industry is trying to do right now is get insurance companies to start paying for parts of clinical studies.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's going to be such a headache for the sites and the facilities and everybody else. And the insurance companies are just like, the sponsors are just like, oh yeah, well, this makes a lot of sense. We don't have to pay as much. We'll make somebody else pay for it. And somebody else has to deal with all the noise. I think it's the biggest mistake. Sorry, I just wanted to
It's
so many things to
extreme
unpack
access
there.
thing.
I did want to say,
so frustrating. I cannot.
so just so you know, this is a multi-pronged problem. And the only reason I say that is I've been to the conferences. You've got sponsor representatives they're saying, just ask us for the resources and we'll give it to you like it's some kind of a magic wand.
Uh-huh.
Try negotiating with CROs and see how that goes. I guarantee you the diversity action plans right now are being slashed by CROs. Nobody is approving it. They're just saying the sponsor rejects it. All of these ways of saying, we just want the money, help us out, we want to be buddies. The CROs don't allow it. That's the one thing I did want to say. But I wanted to come back to this translation thing because everyone's asking whose money, who's paying for the translations. And so I've even had someone ask me, who's going to be paying for this? So here's my theory, and I wanted to know everyone's thoughts on this. So IRBs have to approve ICFs. Sponsors pay for central IRB reviews, which means that every translation of an ICF has to have a different line of ICF approval at an IRB. That's what bankrupts a sponsor. So we could have technology do that. We could have Google Translate. We could do Google Translate for our IRB friends so that we don't have to have so much money spent on ICFs. But the delivery of the ICF verbally to a patient, walking a patient through, is technically the cost of the site because that's the service of the site. Whereas the documentation at the IRB is the cost of the sponsor. So site has like the translation services. The sponsor has the documentation at the IRB services. That's where my head goes. What do you guys think about how we can share the costs of translations in ICFs?
I am sure that if they've opened this line of communication for diversity, they know that this has to come with the whole entire communication, a line of communication. If they did this, they know that they have to translate.
You're so
You're not going
optimistic.
to ask for something and not do another thing. It's a head and a tail together,
Yeah.
So I'm sure that they've thought of all the translations that they need in order for us to provide them diversity.
With the demographics.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's been thought through, I would guarantee that they're meeting the minimum requirements for FDA. I mean, even when you look at like FDA guidance, it defers to like the new DAP guidance defers to FDA guidance on ethnicity or FDA guidance on race and how you report those. And it's like, okay, you get the big five. Like, okay, well, you're still not inclusive. I'm sorry, but you're not,
Yeah.
So
I think it's partially going to come down to just how simple we can make it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
Streamlined.
the simplicity of it.
Yep.
I mean, that's going to drive the adoption. And I heard you mention, Mitch, that Jade is optimistic, and just with this topic in general, I'm really optimistic. I really think we're at a tipping point with the sponsors seeing the value of diversity, seeing the value of hybrid trials, of translation services. I really think we as a industry and leaders need to persevere and just get it ready, because I once it starts going downhill, it's going to go fast.
Yeah.
I really think so.
I'm optimistic that she's optimistic that it's been thought through. I think is my
Yeah, that's true. For sure.
Yeah.
Maybe hold their hand a little bit to get
I would
there.
agree with you on that's minimum.
But yeah, I mean that's what we've been pushing. Is 2024 to me was the year of the sites. In that was from like the financial and budgeting aspect and pushing back, across the board, sites demanding to do better. Same thing when it comes to diversity and inclusion. That's why we started diversity trials. It's great that the DAP guidance just came out, and we're doing a whole separate, sorry to promote Fox, but we're doing a whole separate webinar series essentially on the DAP, and we're going to dissect it as we go over the next 90 days, which leading up to submitting comments. But it's this push that we have to empower our sites in that sense as well, to say, hey, look, there's no excuse for you as a sponsor, as a CRO, to not collect this data that we are taking, that we are collecting, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to do better, and we expect you to do better too when it comes to diversity and inclusion.
And
it's baby steps. Go ahead, Lauren. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, bringing it all back to accountability. That's it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too.
There we go.
It's baby steps towards having teeth in some of these diversity action plans. It's
baby teeth.
Baby teeth.
We have our baby teeth. We're gonna eventually baby teeth fall out. Just remember that.
I'm gonna make diverse straws like pacifiers. It's gonna be.
So I agree. Unconditional advocacy will lead to strong relationships in our communities and in our industry. I really do think that's the way to go. I wish it was that easy. I can't tell you how many times I'm going through negotiations in the past 3 months where I look at that CRO negotiator and I just think to myself, have you been living under a rock? Please provide justification for this or that, or no, our sponsor doesn't approve that, or they have no idea what people are talking about, or maybe they do and they're just told through protocol to push back and to reject.
Right.
And it is absolutely heartbreaking when you see what people say on the front, front and center, we are full diversity, whatever, and then you look at on the back as the CROs or the negotiators where they are the exact opposite. And I don't know how to break through into that level so that we can get to the budget, we can get the negotiation, so we can make sure the sites have what they need to do these. We're not there yet.
I mean, just to make it not elementary, but communication. Oftentimes I feel like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is talking about or doing. Yeah. And so I think at its core, we all just need to have more intentional and purposeful communication throughout this process. It's new, it's different, it's scary. And if you're going to say that you're placing an emphasis on it and on that practice, talk to your team, tell your team, advocate for it at your team level, right? And I think that that's such an important takeaway from this is at its core, not only diversity and inclusion to the patient and the participant is communication, but also within your own team. Talk about the initiatives that you're
Absolutely.
Voicing your expectations.
Absolutely, Lauren.
So we are 2 minutes to go on the top of the hour. It's been an amazing conversation. I think this could be its own podcast series, just like the last one. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up out of respect for everyone's time. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Let's all get into trials together. If I were to hand each of you the microphone right now, and I said, what would you like to tell to the entire industry about diversity, inclusion, and how we can make it better in this industry for better research? What would you tell them? We'll start with our hosts.
All right. As always on this topic, be intentional with your unconditional community engagement.
I like it. I'm gonna say add communication, right? Have that purposeful communication and continue to talk to each and every person, whether you think that they're relevant or not. They have some say in the matter.
Jade?
I am going to say that more smaller sites should have the studies that larger industries are taking it all in. So if we can actually get across to them and ask for them to bring in what industries and large hospitals, have the studies and bring it into smaller sites, everyone will be able to have some type of health progress. It's not only in the industry sites of I see a lot of endocrinologists that is only done in the hospital levels instead of just sites that could actually do some type of study, to save lives and to give a better life.
Ted, Scott, you pick?
I would just kind of feeding off Jade's comments. I think that, who is talking to our patients about being involved in clinical trials is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And the HCP is the most trusted relationship. And we need to make it as simple as possible for that HCP to talk about diversity in clinical trials.
Yep. And I guess I'll wrap us up on a fun concept for everyone. And I believe that we're on the verge of a healthcare revolution that potentially could dwarf the industrial revolution. And the reason that I say that is there are so many new technologies out there, from stem cell research, from CRISPR to AI, quantum computing, and each of these technologies are going to be combined with one another, and each are going to have an indication and a treatment alternative. And what do all of these things have in common? Clinical trials. Every one of them is going to need clinical trials to get to market. And so we are the gatekeepers. So let's get it together.
Yep.
Let's
get it together. Let's make a t-shirt from this episode on that. Let's get it together. And that kind of goes back to mine. On one side, I am stoked for the advocacy that we have right now for diversity. On the other side, I am heartbroken that it took this much time. It took policies from the government for something that seems so logical to happen. This should have happened a long time ago. It should have happened voluntarily, but unfortunately it doesn't. And so for that reason, it's bittersweet for me. I'm so happy to see this. But importantly, if you are watching this right now and you are in a research desert, if you're in a community of people that you know need access to research to live, and they do not lose hope. There are people across the country, the world right now, developing solutions to try to help every single one of your loved ones and your community members to have what they need to live happy and healthy lives. And that is why I'm on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So,
bravo.
Yes, agree 100%. Thank you so much, Jamie. So this is CRPN Central. Please like, comment, subscribe. And that 140 subscribers, a little bit teeny tiny channel, but it's growing. The voice is growing, and it means a lot for the mission if you'd be willing to follow. So we'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
You.
Bye.